Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Monday Art Talks. I'm your
Evening.
host, Fabrizio Aiello, and this is my unwilling co-host,
Unwilling. You showed up.
Yang Yan Zhao. And I know I say that wrong every time, but if you would like to correct me on air so everybody learns how to say your name, that I'm
Well, I usually say Yang Yanjiao,
Yang Yan Zhao. Okay. I
but
Google it every
lots of people
time.
say other things. So
It's like we would be the worst buddy cop duo like on a movie because we have the worst, like the hardest names to pronounce.
that's right.
Well, thanks for joining. So we'll chat a little bit while people kind of pop in. So what you been up to?
I have been working to finish up Empire of the Undying Sun, my horror campaign guide for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and 1st edition. So almost there. Almost there. I don't think I'm quite going to finish by the end of the month, but hopefully early in September.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting. I don't know if this has been announced. I did contribute to some of the art, correct? Officially?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
It was a lot of fun because I hadn't really done any commissions. I've been working on Horus H. Hoover, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I did somebody else. I did Unbreakable Argonauts, which was a lot of fun. It was like a Western vampire horror thing. Ooh. And then I did yours, which was just sort of classic fantasy. And I, as a consumer of art, love atmospheric effects, rain, snow, stuff like that, but they are so hard to do. So most of the time I'd stay far, far away from them. But this, I really kind of dug in. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, it turned out awesome.
Thank you. Hey, Kibo, what's up? It has been a while. Thanks for joining. Can I get in on that buddy cop scenario in a tertiary role, a la Huggy Bear or Leo Getz? You know, I was talking to my wife the other night. If I had missed Lethal Weapon 2 in the theater, I was a formidable age, right? You know, if I had missed that, I think I would be a different person today. Is that really? Like, I really believe that. Like, if I hadn't been introduced to Kiss, if I hadn't watched Lethal Weapon 2 in the theater, I think I would be a different person. Now,
I mean, Rika was something special.
She was. Shout out to my friend's mom who took us to the movies because it was R-rated and got us in. So this is Senate. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. Although, you know, looking back on it, I'm surprised at just how bad of cops Roogs and Murtaugh are. Like, they are exactly the opposite of what you would want in a police force.
Yeah, they were pretty terrible. But I mean, it's such a great movie. The sense of humor. Not that we're going to talk about Lethal Weapon 2, but I was just thinking about that the other night. Those formidable movies like events. And to me, I totally think Leo Getz and Lethal Weapon 2 is one of them.
Yep.
All right. So the topic of tonight is civilization without art. It sounds super like highfalutin, highbrow, and pretentious. And as you know, there is a very strict, rigorous way that I come up with these topics. And it is basically, if I think about it for more than 30 seconds, it becomes a topic. I do not prepare. I don't Google anything. Half of the stuff I say, I'm sure will be outright incorrect. But I posted on Twitter. I'm like, I don't know, maybe we should start doing that again. Conversations where you don't know what you're talking about. We're not constantly Googling and fact checking.
Yep.
I like to think of them, and I don't know about you, like wedding reception conversations. Like whenever I go to a wedding reception for somebody I don't know, you always sit with people you have no idea who they are, right? And my favorite thing to do is I'm not really great with small talk, and I'll just turn to them. I'm like, so do you think we have free will, or just whatever I can think of? I find that to be far more entertaining than Where are you from? How long was your drive? How was the traffic?
Yeah.
So
Once people
that's
get a couple drinks in them.
yeah. So that's what I like to think of these conversations as. I will start with a little preamble. I think I don't know how I really have anything prepared, but this is what got me thinking of it, I guess. So, and I'm going to make a lot of assumptions that I believe are right. Again, they could be totally wrong. If there's a anthropologist or a sociologist or an art historian in the chat, please correct me. But we kind of judge civilizations by a few metrics, I would assume. And again, I'm totally making this up on the fly here. But art, technology, complexity of language, right? Stuff like that. So that's how we categorize sort of advanced civilization versus primitive. And I'm assuming, and again, I'm totally like art would be sort of secondary. So like I'm thinking people start with grunts to pictures, and then pictures become language. That's kind of where I think, right? We'll say that's roughly.
I mean, that's how it seems to be.
Yeah. So it's obviously an integral part of the whole process. And I was just wondering, I'm like, let's assume that you have a civilization that has advanced and has along the way created beautiful art and architecture and all this kind of stuff, which is exactly what we would expect. But then what if at a certain point they either make a conscious effort or subconsciously they allow the destruction of art of the civilization?
So 20th century. Okay.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, I'm utterly obsessed with just like this, like the destruction of art and architecture, and we don't think anything of it. Like every city now has these sprawling apartment buildings with these colorful blocks. It's just it's horrific, right? But I'm like, does that, like, once a civilization is established, though, does it affect it? You know what I mean? Like the civilization needs art to progress, but once it's established and you allow the destruction of this art, like, does it regress?
Yes.
So let's just start there. So yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, as we were half joking about the 20th century, you can look at the 20th century and look at the cultures where this had happened. A lot of Soviet cultures, right? Look at the Soviet Union. Now they had some culture, right? And the whole thing about changing the art, destroying what was there and changing it, is they wanted to bring down the civilization that they had, and they wanted to build something new. And at least for the first 20, 30 years, they paid a lot of money for art. They have like fantastically designed posters.
Yes.
Ballet was important. They had that. They had films. If you go into other cultures, China, they got rid of the four olds. Old culture and old way of thinking were two of those things. And what do they build? They build apartment blocks that look very much like Soviet apartment blocks.
Yeah.
It's just very boring, very rigid. So they don't look that grand. Now, if you go to like Tiananmen Square, a lot of stuff there actually does look better and is more artistic. And they have like lampposts that look, I don't know that Art Nouveau is quite the right word for it, but they have a lot of design and intention to them, right? Because these are the government areas. They want to show that the government is impressive and whatnot. So, we see real examples. Well, and if you want to go even further, you could see like the Spaniards in Mesoamerica. They destroyed, all of the Aztec and Incan art, partially because they were committing human sacrifices and doing things that were abominations under God, and they replaced it with their own architecture and like fusions between Spanish and Mexican architecture. So, so they wanted to change the culture again. So anytime you see like wide scale destruction of art, not just like a changing of style or fashion, but wholesale destruction or replacement of art. It's someone has the idea that, okay, we have to change the entire culture of this civilization.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's how I see like the cult, because cultures are ordered by values. There's a hierarchy
Right.
of values, and the art would sort of be an explicit outgrowth of that. So
Hmm.
if you destroy the art, which is, again, outgrowth of a value, then you're implicitly or explicitly just getting rid of that value, even if the
Right.
value exists in the culture after a generation or two. It'll get foggy, or it'll be hard to remember. Oh yeah, didn't we used to do this and we cared about that? And it's funny you bring up Soviet Union, because I was thinking about that, because I think they, I don't know, destroyed 10,000 Orthodox churches or something. Like
Yeah.
it was insane. But I have to admit, I went to like a Soviet Union propaganda poster exhibit, and I
Hmm.
freaking love that stuff. It really
They're incredible.
was really great stuff. So at least they understood that they can't just destroy it without replacing it with something that is
Yeah.
at least maybe not as good, but at least something, for people to,
Hmm.
to latch on to.
And
Um,
people won't be happy with me saying it, but there was a certain German government in the 1930s. They also had fantastic art, and they really understood the point of design
oh, for sure.
in their works. So they do it because it works. And when you have people say like um, stuff like Jackson Pollock, being big on promoting abstract art, being big on promoting really ugly architecture in places that really are not people friendly. That absolutely is by design. It's not like, well, we didn't have anything better, so we're just going to do this.
Yeah.
It's that is intentionally being put there. And it's the same thing with even television. There used to be a lot more wholesome family value TV shows. Uh, you can't really find those anymore unless you're watching old reruns. So it's all of it is by design. Now, is it one top down, like one person is saying this, or is it like, if you and I both suddenly owned a major TV network or production studio in Hollywood, we may be producing similar stuffs because we have similar values.
Yep.
So
Just aligned interest.
yeah, is it just aligned interest? Is there, some conspiracy Bilderberger Illuminati dominating it? I don't know. But the results, we can see the results.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree about it's not necessarily top down. There could be people at the top that are pushing it, but
Sure.
it's emerged
Right.
through counterculture, whatever we want to call it, subculture that
Yeah.
has sort of broken through what I like to think of as sort of like the ghost of Europe. So here's my
Mhm.
sort of like the other idea I was thinking about is the U.S. in particular. We inherited essentially from Europe, right?
Yep.
Their values regarding art and architecture and all of that kind of stuff. And we held on to it for a long time, but eventually, that it kind of dissipates. And not just sort of the actual skill level, but the value. So instead of,
Mhm.
like, in any medium to major city, like I'll use Pittsburgh as an example. If you get a certain view of it, you'll see these incredible buildings that were turn of the century, and then next to it you'll see the glass box, the glass rectangle,
Yep.
and each one of those buildings will come down eventually. It's inevitable, and the thing that will replace it is a glass rectangle in every single city across the country. So we'll have these developments of square colored apartments, glass rectangles, and then that'll be it. um, and I guess my question is it inevitable that if you have a culture, civilization that isn't constrained by value, and I'll just put a question mark on value at this point, that and I'm gonna come back to this, but with sort of free market capitalism, you will inevitably get to sort of the race to the bottom when it comes to art and architecture, because
Mhm.
there's really there's no reason not to have the glass rectangle if your ultimate goal is purely cost. As a builder,
Yes.
I make the most money. As a construction worker, I make the most money. As a person renting the office, I can rent it for like, there's no reason other than sort of a culturally imposed rule to say that we want beauty regardless of
Yeah.
cost. And that really kind of like terrifies me, because if it is inevitable, then it's just we're just going to watch every city across the country just replace these, I don't know, old firehouses and beautiful churches with, square metal buildings.
Yeah, well, what happens is, the weaker culture eventually comes to be dominated by a stronger one. And the question is, will the weaker culture sort of collapse in on itself, and then from that, a new, stronger culture emerges? Possible. Or it could be a culture from the outside. I mean, think about it in some ways. When we were kids, U.S. culture was at its height, right? How many foreign movies did you see coming to your local cinemaplex? How many foreign shows did you see on TV? How many foreign, not counting like Canadian and British rock stars, did you hear on the radio? You very rarely heard any foreign media
Yeah.
because our culture was so strong at the time. But now go on Netflix. Korean shows are some of the most popular ones. Chinese shows are on there. Japanese shows are on there. I watched a Turkish kind of superhero show that was amazing in how bad that guy was. Um, and so, why is that? It's because our culture is weakening, and we're currently in a decline. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to stay here and whatnot. So, where does that come from with art? Well, the big metal box or the big glass box is what's going on now. But at some point, like maybe when we have a manufacturing resurgence, or it could be like some crisis where we don't have as much access to foreign materials. We might have to look back and find like, okay, well, we have a lot of local stone in a lot of places here.
Hmm.
So maybe we need to do like a fusion of glass and stone building, and maybe you'll see uh, some sort of fusion of the two in some new way that makes it much more interesting. There's stuff like the Apple campus in California. That's like a big oval.
Mhm.
You do see some innovative buildings around. So there's still some stuff there. There's still some stuff going on, but it's just not widespread. And what could be is, if something happened and like there were earthquake and it destroyed a city, maybe you would see a lot of newer designs showing up in new buildings. If our culture were stronger, if we're on an upswing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's an interesting concept about the stronger culture versus the weaker. Um, just to put a pin in the free market thing, just for the record, I have read Friedman, Soul, and
Mhm.
Hazlitt, so I don't want anybody like coming after me for the free market stuff, but it's legitimate. I've always thought about that, like,
Sure.
race to the bottom. It's all based on values. So at any given time, values in a city could change versus a country
Yeah.
could change.
Oh, absolutely. Look at a place like Portland. If you go back to 70s and 80s, Portland was like 100% blue collar. Even through the 90s, you look at grunge fashion, that was portraying
Yeah.
blue collar values. But somewhere around there, the politics shifted, and now it's totally different. It's closer aligned to like a New York City or a San Francisco than it would be to like a Des Moines or Kansas City.
Yeah, and I guess if the only value, and okay, so let's say we have a civilization, we have some sort of shared culture. That culture is the hierarchy of values. If that gets removed and the
Mhm.
only value is essentially profit,
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing to go is art, right?
Sure.
Things get dumbed down as much as possible. Music, art, all that stuff.
Uh,
Um,
yes, but then at some point, like if you look at if you go back like to the Gilded Age and through like the 1920s, a lot of these really impressive buildings, some of them Art Nouveau, some of them other things. Why were they built? It's because people who had a crap ton of money wanted to show how awesome they were by building these magnificent buildings. And I think eventually you may start to see something like that where people either they want to push themselves or they want to push a brand. uh like, I don't know, maybe there'll be pyramids in every city because that's, well, you know what, even Apple Store and a lot of places they were making those glass cubes for a while.
yeah.
Now that's not the greatest example, but in the future you might see that. And then other people who don't have so much money, they say, "Oh, well, it's impressive. Mine has to look impressive too." And we might get back to a place where that is a value, because if profit is the only value and having money is the only value, at some point you got to let people know you have money.
Yeah,
Uh,
but you also need taste. And I
I don't agree. And to prove this, I will give you China, circa 2008. So I was living there in Beijing, and you would see women walking around with like a Louis Vuitton bag, a Prada belt, like a Coach jacket or something, and it was like all these brands that totally did not fit together. There was no theme, and like the clothing didn't match. But for them, the highest value was to show that I'm not one of these poors anymore. I can afford luxury goods. And I think it might end up something like that.
Yeah, well, okay, perfect point is so the place I live now, right up the street from me, it's like the historic part of the town, and there's
Mhm.
a street of incredible houses, I don't know, 10 million or whatever a
Wow.
piece. They're old historic buildings, but you have like this beautiful colonial and you have this Tudor, like all different kind of styles. It's really an incredible street. But they're obviously grandfathered. These are very, very old
Mhm.
houses. The place I lived before, if you went down the street, there were houses that were also millions of dollars, but they were the gaudiest, ugliest, like
Yeah.
so to me, like
Eh,
that's what I think ultimately will replace these old historic things is just like new version of rich, but it'll have zero taste. It'll just be this, I don't know, I like uncurated, just gold car kind of stuff.
yeah. That's exactly what happened. Well, that is happening in California, and it has been happening at least since 2010 when I lived there. You go into some of these suburbs, and they had houses which you would not find strange in Pittsburgh in the Midwest. And then in these suburbs, and they were knocked down. A lot of them were bought by Chinese investors. They would build these gaudy mansions that look like they more match Versailles than
Yeah.
a typical southwestern home. And they maximize. They have like very little yard because they don't care about yards.
Yeah.
And it's again, they have all this money. A lot of it they're trying to get out of China, so they build these
Mm,
mansions. And like the the city I lived in before I left, I started looking at houses there in 2012, and they were about $400,000, which sounds quaint now. And
yeah.
because so many were bought and torn down, a lot of these like super houses were, like 1.5 million, 2 million, so that those average price houses were up to like 800,000, 900,000. But and anyways, like that's exactly what will happen with people who have the money, and a lot of them don't have taste. But then just like everything, like it's fashion, right? So at some point, the people who are like, no, I have money, so I want something that looks good. So not only will you spend the money to make more original buildings instead of just the most utilitarian piece of garbage you can, they will eventually get good designers. Now, not all of them,
Maybe.
if we look back at art, not all the art was great. in the
Right.
20s.
Right.
But eventually, if profit is the only motive, like at some point, even in communistic systems, they still devised ways to like be better. Like people from communist companies told me like, oh, well, you would get like a special award or a special certificate, and that's how you were sort of higher up, and there was a hierarchy. And just like art, there's going to be worse art. There's art for everyone with AI, and then you're going
Yeah.
to have real art, which is people are actually designing these things and making you competent visual images. And same with houses. There's a bunch of pre-made plans you can buy now, but you then you get an architect to get them customized, and at some point, people are going to say, I'd rather
Maybe.
do my own thing.
Maybe. Shout out to John. Hey, John, how's it going? Um, okay, and sort of the last part of this that I was thinking about, and you can just say no, but I was thinking about iconoclasm.
Mm.
And now, obviously, that's a highly specific thing, but I think as a culture, if it is sort of in the back of your mind, that it automatically just sets you on a path, you know what I mean, of utilitarianism. So
Yep.
not even in a religious context, but if the country is founded by majority Protestants and they are iconoclastic, then art and anything sort of related to that is definitely subjugated as being less important, or it's just. So I wonder about that specifically for the U.S. So maybe it's a bunch of factors, and maybe it is a stronger culture from South Korea, not these places. Maybe it's the profit motive, but also maybe there's this thread of utilitarianism that comes from Stuart Mill and those philosophers, because of essentially the people that founded the country. The thing about iconoclasm, which I find not interesting, it's horrific to me. It's like it's the same thing as saying like black hole or something. I always think about, just like whenever you find like the Taliban destroying those Buddhist,
Yep.
those are gone. They'll never come back. It's like it's an anti-culture to me.
Yeah.
Iconoclasm is the exact opposite of culture. So having that as like a tenant in your culture it's a strange thing. It's like it's eating things. It's not creating anything. So I don't know. That was another thing I was thinking about for the founding of the U.S. Is it a stretch, a bridge too far?
I don't know. I don't know that I 100% agree. I mean, like to some extent, it's true. A lot of those the early settlers wanted to get away from Catholicism, which of course was full of icons, and then even like the Church of England, which is sort of at that time was like Catholicism light. Um, so to an extent that makes sense, but I'm thinking of like Japan and their very minimalist design aesthetics. Like you sort of see a lot of that in like early American design. I'm thinking of like shaker cabinets and different furniture and stuff, and having that utilitarian mind sense, like that becomes its own kind of design sense, which is I think it's a bit different because they were saying like, well, we want to replace this gaudy stuff, this stuff that is full of excess, and we just want to be simple and straightforward. And they really built buildings and very magnificent things that were to that more austere sense, but it was still going towards something. So, and the thing that they were replacing it with still made sense because, like a lot of minimalism or even like stoicism, like those values, you could sort of see in like a Puritan ethic. And so that was like a different culture, but it's still aimed towards something that is true. Their whole thing would be like, well, we need to spend more time focused on God, less time on this other stuff. Don't get distracted with such and such things. So it was still oriented in one way, versus if you look at like iconoclasts of like the Soviet Union, you're tearing it down and you're promoting the state essentially, where like nobody liked that. There's only so much out of like a range of human norms and human acceptance that you can do. And it is the same as like with the minimalists. Eventually you're going to go too far and people are going to want like something fancy.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to push back, but the reason I say that is because let's say you're a Puritan, right? And like thankfully we get away from that art, that those processions, like sculptures, just everything. It was just inundated. Finally, we're away from that stuff. The concept of an artist, you know what I mean? That would have been. There's essentially no place for it at that point. No real like. No, it's
Yeah.
Why would you be an artist? Like,
Yeah.
Because the only thing you would be creating as an artist is religious art at that time.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
So I think this sort of like overall like diminishing of sort of the trade of being an artist. I've always felt it in the U.S. Hey Marcus, how's it going? I'm glad.
Not the Puritan.
You know what I mean? Just like an overall sort of like diminishing of the role of an artist. Whereas, you pick, anytime and I'll use Italy, but any sort of like Catholic, or not even Catholic, non-Protestant area, an artist is like, you're doing some great work for these really elevated reasons. And I just wonder if the overall over the years that it has had an effect in just the attitude of art and being an artist in place in society.
Oh, I would say yes. I would say for sure that really only sort of got overcome with mass media and advertising culture.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even if you go to museums and you look at American art from 1776 through let's say 1880, there's really not that many artists there. There's not that many paintings. There's not that many sculptures. If you look at a lot of the art, they'll have a lot of furniture. They'll have a lot of things that people need in everyday life. And then maybe you'll talk a little bit about buildings as well. But most of our historic buildings don't exist anymore either. So,
yeah,
it's in some ways it's hard to think of those.
Yeah. So those are my three main things, and you shot them all down. So,
well, no, I kind of agree. I kind of agree with the third one. Yeah, because if you look at most of American history, what were they producing art for? You could look at the parts of the U.S. where Catholics were a larger part, and you would see religious art there. At some point, it would be political art for like newspapers.
Landscapes. There were landscapes at a certain point. Later,
but there weren't that many until you get into the late 1800s.
Yeah.
At the late 1800s, we sort of catch up with Europe. Although it's a little weird because it's after the invention of the camera. But for some reason, then people started painting, and then I think the 20th century for the U.S. was absolutely fantastic if you don't listen to professors and art critics.
Right. I mean, as you shouldn't. Now, admittedly, during that time in the U.S., they were dealing with a lot of other stuff, right? So
yeah, well, hey, most of it was like survival, you know. Yeah. So your civilization, your culture has to reach a certain point where you can even consider having people do religious artwork. Otherwise, it's just like Bob on his time off.
Yeah.
And then you go from people who could do religious artwork to people who could do commercial artwork. And and comic books are included in that. They're a
Yeah,
form of commercial artwork.
yeah,
And
for sure.
then once you get past that, you really have to have luxury time that you can produce amazing personal works of art.
Yeah, that you don't need to make money from, just absolute hobby.
So I mean, a country, a culture sort of needs a while to get there. And sort of to bring it back to China for a second, what is Chinese art? What is Chinese culture? Current Chinese art, current Chinese culture. Don't tell me about tea. Don't tell me about kung fu. Don't tell me about silk scrolls and stuff like that. Like, what is it now? I don't know,
Yeah,
because they sort of don't have their own. They're starting. Things are starting to coalesce. Things are starting to appear, but the vast majority of this of the culture until maybe 10, 20 years ago, they really couldn't afford people to do art except for the few people who were doing political art for the government. Now they have people doing art, and we're starting to see more people who are doing individual art projects. Now they still have like political constraints that we don't really have here, but you're starting to see people be more and more creative over there. But still, like I said, I don't know what style would it be. I don't know. They have kind of like a
yeah.
manga style.
It is interesting to me that um, that if the profit motive ultimately is the value of, we'll say, a large part of the U.S. and it's just profit motive. I mean, look where people actually spend their time, and you would think that there would be some sort of realization that, well, you know what, nobody's standing in front of a de Kooning or a Jackson Pollock for an hour, doing studies of it, and nobody's taking their class, and they're all sitting around.
Yeah.
It just, it doesn't happen. So to me, that's where that, like when you said, is it sort of a top down thing or is it just aligned interest? And we always come back to this, but the modern art stuff really, it feels so forced and fake at this
Yeah.
point that it's like there's no other possible explanation for it. But what, Europe, okay, so where do people go when they go to Europe? They go to the realist, the
Yeah.
representational art and museums and the old buildings, and they check out like
Yep.
nobody is going to stand in front of a glass rectangle and take pictures of it. Wow, this is the fifth tallest glass rectangle in the country. Like nobody cares. Let me check here. John's Longbox. I think all art should be funded by the government and not be offensive to me personally.
Well, so I know he's joking, but
Yeah.
I think all art. Let's take that first part. I think all art should be funded by the government. Like there are countries when it's like that, and it's freaking awful because it's whatever crap supports whatever the current administration is, or it's just like the National Endowment for the Arts, where they did stuff like piss Jesus and like totally like the one guy who cut himself with razor blades and he had AIDS and was dripping blood on canvas and
Yeah.
people and stuff. And it's like that's not art. So would I want bureaucrats to decide what art to be funded? No, never.
Yeah. They're always the worst. They have the worst taste in anything, like music, art. Canada's pretty big in that, obviously. I know they fund a lot of stuff. And even the US, I always think of that. I think it's in Boston, a big piece of public art, and it's like arms holding each other or something. It's real abstract. It's just terrible.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously, it's a way to funnel money to people. I mean,
Sure.
all of that is just.
Absolutely. There's I mean, even sometimes they get things right for the wrong reasons. Like I don't know if you know the IRS building in Cleveland.
No.
They were pissed because they hired an artist to do sculpture for the outside, right? And he made a giant rubber stamp that had the word "free" on it.
Oh, wait, I
like,
do know
yes.
that. That's funny.
But
Yeah.
and the thing is, to me, it's like if you look at the early 20th century, who starts saying what art and what literature is good? It's a lot of these people who can't do art, who can't do literature, somehow they get teaching jobs, and
Yeah.
they're making these decisions.
Yeah, it's like we used to put our most important things in these containers that were the most beautiful. And like
Yeah.
public libraries. I used to, any like new city I'd go to, I would go to obviously the local art museum and the local public library
Yeah.
because that was always my favorite building. As of recently, I stopped doing that because public libraries have become essentially second homes for homeless people. And
Yes.
they've just been like, it's so I don't even go to them anymore. But once upon a time, we like, if something was important, you could tell from a distance something important is in that building, you know?
Well, for public libraries too, I think it was Carnegie. I could be wrong, but it was one of the people from the Gilded Age who everybody hate. Like, he had all this money and he was throwing parties and whatever, and somebody started giving him crap like, you have all this money, you're not going to give back to the community, make it a better place. And he was like, yeah, you're right. So about 60% of the public libraries in the US, he ended up funding, and he had like certain requirements. And part of the requirements were, the windows had to be so big so there was enough natural light. And even though it took some cajoling, he really cared about making these things where everybody had access to and making them beautiful spaces. And
Mhm.
that's one thing that's different, is even if you didn't like the guy politically, which a lot of people did not, people were very happy to take his money to make awesome looking places for public use. Could we even do that? Could you have like like a Soros, make a park without people protesting it? Could you have Elon Musk designing some public library without people protesting it? I
That's
mean,
true.
that's also one place we're in, and part of the reason I think art has somewhat stalled out in the U.S. Is that we're so divided in everything, and it's become so tribal. It's hard for any one thing to gain traction. Now, this situation we're in can't last forever. So at some point, like either for an external reason or some
Yeah.
side of whatever culture war, even if we haven't even seen that side yet, is going to win or become dominant, and then art will be able to flourish again.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody everywhere will read Horace H. Hoover.
Yes,
The
he will
end.
be on the top. We will
uh,
see him outside the IRS building.
Kibo, I was just thinking about how China and Korea have been increasingly producing their own forms of comics manga with a
Sure.
great surge of indie comic spirit, if you will. I haven't read any of them. I should. Um,
Um,
I've always been interested in even, going back like foreign films. And yeah, I know that sounds
mhm.
pretentious, but it just like it just mixes it up a little bit. Even if it's not a great movie, watching a French movie, it's like, okay, that was weird, but that was kind of cool. And the way they handled this scene here was different. It just
Mhm.
it just kind of makes you kind of get out of your own way sometimes.
Yeah, foreign stuff is hard. So I remember some years ago, I was visiting my parents, and they had cable, and they had a TV station that was Kung Fu TV. And Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was on. I was like, oh, I haven't seen this in like 10 years.
Yeah.
Let me check it out. And it was the English dub. And there's the scene in the
Oh,
tea house where she's like, I am the phoenix who rises. And she's saying all these names she's giving herself. I was like, oh, this really wasn't as good as I remember it. Then the next night it was on again, and it was in Mandarin. And I watched it again. It's like, oh my God, this is awesome.
hmm.
So some of that is like as close as you can get to that original other culture, without going through interpreters and very poor dubbing. It's better.
Yeah, I mean the dumbing down. I don't know if this is true. It seems like it's true. Maybe it's apocryphal, but the movies in the US, whenever we started to dumb things down, it
Mhm.
was whenever the foreign gross, box office gross, either outpaced domestic. There was like a certain point, right? Because for a
Yeah.
long time it was always domestic. So we could cater toward, Red Dawn. Like that's.
Mhm.
But at a certain point, foreign starts to outpace or it's about, so we start dumbing
Yes.
it down that way, translations and all that kind of stuff. Oh, you know what, you don't even really need to understand the words, you can understand Fast and the Furious just by watching it or something.
Yes.
And then when I heard that, I'm like, that sounds right. It's like music getting dumbed down to like a first grade level, literature, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's been going on for a long time though, because if you look back to 80s action movies, they all have some sex scene in there. And the reason that they all have a sex scene is because the Europeans wanted it. And all those sex scenes generally have an extended version with more nudity and more boobs that they would show in the European cut.
That's interesting.
So then,
Excuse me, I'm going to Google Lethal Weapon 2 in Spanish. Go ahead.
And then, you start to see exactly what you were saying in the 2000s when China, they really started opening a lot of movie theaters, and that became like a big thing to go see movies over there. So that's when, in order to get into those theaters, the US, they started partnering with all these Chinese companies. And that's why, like Iron Man 3, he goes to China to get acupuncture and surgery for his heart.
No kidding.
And that's why, like, all these, like, Independence Day 2, they have the US partnering with Chinese astronauts or something.
Huh.
Or the movie 2012, where it's the destruction of the world, and they're making these arcs. Where do they make the arcs? In China. Why? Because they wanted Chinese money.
Interesting. It is a ploy. So if by aids you mean people that help you create art, I totally agree, John. I'm going to look for an aid right now. I worked on rooftops of buildings in Manhattan. Some of the art you never see in the Wall Street area is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They used to think that was important for everybody back then.
Yeah. Especially like those buildings, like just like the top part of the building is just beautifully ornate. And again, you're not going to get that close to it ever, unless you're John and you're actually working on the roofs of those buildings. From a distance, you'll see, wow, they really, did something amazing up top. Don't have Obama design any more libraries.
Oh, man, that was awful.
I think it was the Brutalist. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it's just like a Brutalist, whatever. Like the idea that brutalism, I know we talked about this before and I apologize, but it is such a ludicrous, it's not a style, it's an anti-style. It's the opposite of design. It's what you do. Oh, man, it kills me. Hey, Keith, how's it going?
Can you imagine ordering a building like that, being like the CEO of a company? You're talking to an architect. I want people to really know that I'm oppressing them and screwing them over with their prices. Brutalist, please.
Yeah, and it's like anything else. Everything was like, oh, this is John, he's up and coming, everybody loves him. Oh, everybody loves him, so there's no sort of independent thought. I guarantee you, whoever built that design is a famous architect, and they've built other horrific brutalist. All right, I'm gonna stop talking about brutalism. A totalitarian state's main function oppresses the truth, so truth expression is outlawed. Then society no longer receives its design and art from artists, but the state itself. Yeah, and it's like the cubicle farms, brutalist architecture, like geometric buildings. It's soul crushing. The dubs are always let down. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Crouching Tiger, because I was planning on watching that. I haven't seen it in so long. I loved that movie.
Great movie.
I watched it a couple of times in the theater when it came out. And the funniest part is, like, I recommended it to some friends of mine. They're like, what the hell why did you recommend that? I'm like, what are you talking about?
That was amazing.
It's an incredible movie. Blew my mind.
There's a whole style of movies similar in China, the wuxia movies. But like Crouching Tiger is like, the high watermark. It's like the tombstone of Westerns.
Yeah. There's another one, like Hero. Like there was I remember 3 around the relatively the same time. It was like Crouching Tiger, Hero. There was another one. And they were all just Hero.
Don't even start on Hero. And it was amazing until the end.
Okay, but they were. And
then I was like, "F this."
Incredibly beautiful movies, at least. Yeah, I try
Yeah.
not to watch dubs.
Euro was really well shot.
I actually think watching TV you don't understand is without subtitles is an
Yeah.
edifying experience. I remember
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in South Korea for a thing once, and it's a layover, and I'm sitting there, and there was a TV, and I could not tell what this. At first, I thought it was a game show. Then it was like a cooking show. Like I had no idea what this thing was about. But because of that, it was utterly fat. I like you could not pull me away. Like your flights. No, I need to find out what is going on with the
Yes.
squid in the window. And like, yeah,
Yeah, that reminds me. When I was a teenager, we had one local TV station that was all Spanish station, and right when I was getting ready for work every day, they had like a Spanish soap opera. So I'd watch a little bit while I was eating lunch,
love it.
and like those were the best because I had no idea what was going on. And like one day there was like two couples arguing in a parking garage, and then the women started like grabbing each other and like rolling around, wrestling on the ground, like on an oil spot. And the men were there like, like what is going on?
Yeah, I think it's because we've been just we've lowered the bar so much with movies and TV shows. Things are
Yeah.
repeated and repeated again, and it's like even if it's a murder mystery, like half of the time you can guess it before it even starts.
Yeah.
Having a little separation and trying to decipher things is interesting. I think that's
not all art, John. Some you just don't want to see.
That's true. We need more Art Deco. We need more Art Deco, Art Nouveau. I mean, anything. I'll take anything but brutalism, really. Chrysler Building is a great. Yeah, it's a fantastic building.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
Yeah, Art Deco. It's funny because many years ago, not many, unspecified amount of time in the past, I was designing some Art Deco stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. I'll just Google it, and there's not that many buildings that are Art Deco. Like legitimately, if you're lucky, like one building in a city has like some Art Deco in it, and it is interesting why that is. Like it was brief, it was popular, and then it disappeared as quickly as it came. Now there might be some historical reason for that. I have no idea what it is.
I personally think the reason why it disappeared was the Depression. Because a lot of those buildings were built up through the 20s, and if you look at like the late teens after World War I through the Roaring 20s, there was tons of money. So people had all sorts of money for extravagant buildings, and that's when a lot of at least Eastern and Midwestern and a couple of California cities, that's when their main city centers got built. And then things slowed down once you got into the 30s.
Interesting. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I would love, like when you're walking through a town and you're like, oh, these are all colonial, these are all blah, blah, blah. It'd be great to like be able to walk through a whole part of a city that is Art Deco. I just think that would be,
there's certain streets in Los Angeles where you can do that. Generally, they're not the places you would want to walk around, but they're there.
Yeah. Fearless. Is that the other movie, Kibo? I can't remember. I remember there were like 3 in like a couple of years that I watched.
Maybe you're thinking of House of Flying Daggers?
House of Flying Daggers. That's the other one.
Also starring Jung Zi.
I watch Indian TV with no subtitles. Really? Is there a station with that?
Indian TV. I've
Yeah.
seen some movies. Indian movies confuse me.
Yeah, I'd rather. I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. I think it would all come out as a comedy in my head, like no matter what was playing.
Like I kind of respect a lot of those Indian movies because they literally will put every single genre of movie together into one 90-minute package. And like I can respect them saying like, we want to make sure we serve all the audiences. It totally doesn't work for me. But hey, I got to respect them for trying.
It's like this weird, anytime I see clips of Bollywood movies, this is a weird like thing to say, but it immediately makes me think of Electric Company, and old people know Electric Company. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
There's just something, yeah, like the Spider-Man. There's just a weird connection where I'm like, yeah, it looks like Spider-Man on Electric Company. Everything that that I see them
Yes.
do.
Yes.
Um, all right, I think we've exhausted this conversation. Um, Kibo Brahmastra Part 1 was pretty great. To those in my home, I've never seen any. I know a couple of years ago there was a really popular movie.
RRR.
Yes.
That was a great movie. I have to say I didn't quite realize how much Indians hated the British until then. But like,
Interesting.
dang.
I mean, no comment. I love the British, so no comment on that.
Some of this stuff I wonder too. Like how much of it is people who are butthurt years later versus like people then, because it's like the whole Bruce Lee thing, him telling the story about there was a sign on a park that he claims said no Chinese or dogs, like it was only for Westerners in Hong Kong. That never happened. And like there's a lot of Chinese movies starting around that time that were very like anti-Western. They couldn't do too much because it was still under Hong Kong was still under British rule at the time, but like that kind of sentiment still persists in China.
Interesting.
And it's like, I wonder, there's stuff like there's video, like they have reenactments of like the Chinese military fighting the Japanese military. And there's videos you can watch online where people will get so mad, they will jump out of the seats in the audience and start beating the crap out of the actor who's playing a Japanese soldier. And it's like, and it makes me wonder, like, not that I'm saying the Chinese were happy with it, but were most Chinese that upset back then? I mean, if you're like in Nanking or something, sure. If you're in one of those areas, I could certainly understand. But for most of China, were they that upset that they would beat up actors?
That's wild. I mean, I don't know. I could see that happening now. So maybe here to some degree. Nothing. I don't think anything's off the table. Yeah, but all right. Well, this has been fun. Thanks for. And I like the fact that I have a name. Usually, I just say hi. This is Fabrizio, but this is a Monday art talk, and if I stick to Monday and we just talk about art, then it's not false advertising. And
sounds good.
That's what I'm trying to do. Alrighty. I put your link in the chat. I'll do it again.
Thanks. Yeah, guys, go check out Empire of the Undying Sun if you like tabletop role-playing games for Dungeons and Dragons 5e and 1e. Finishing up the writing very soon. Hopefully going to print in another, a couple of months. Hopefully getting it out around Christmas time. So come back it if you like it. If you want some horror in your tabletop gaming, check it out.
Yeah, some very cool art, and I'm not saying that about me. Excellent like some other people. Yeah, and I'm doing stuff. I am doing these. I'm just showing them because they're fun. I made these like little Horace Age Hoover notepads and sketchbooks, just because I've been binding books. And I did some Horace H. Hoover stuff. I have been promising to show a little demo of the game engine I built one of these days.
Yeah, you should.
Maybe in a couple of weeks or something. I know there's not a lot of overlap between comics and games and all that kind of stuff, but somebody might be interested.
Similar. I mean, most people who play games like comics. Most people who read comics play some kind of games.
Yeah, and even like we talked about, like maybe it's a writing tool. There's always a lot of there's a lot of room for like exploration in different mediums. I think that people don't take advantage of necessarily.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks everybody in chat for popping in. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me, Yang Yang Zhao.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll talk to everybody later. Bye.
Bye.